Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Escobar Houdini shares how he landed a crucial internship at a private equity firm in Germany before managing to turn one of his only interviews into an offer at a top investment bank in London. We cover why it was so easy for him to recover when his entire group was laid off at the bank, his focus on his end goal of private equity, how to navigate recruiters in the process of landing a job at a buy-side firm. This is a bit of a longer episode to dive into some of the nuances of his path. Hope you guys enjoy. Great. Escobar Houdini, thank you for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So it'd be great if you could just start off with a quick background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently based in London, working sort of as a senior associate within a sector specialist private equity firm. I cover primarily continental Europe, some of the UK. It varies depending on where you are in terms of the economy and what you're looking at within that specific sector. I'm a German national. I've moved to the UK about 5 years ago, five and a half years ago now. And effectively used business school here in London to break into banking within London. I figured, coming from Germany and making the transition would be extremely hard, especially unless you have a, outstanding academic track record and outstanding internships and all these things. So my case is certainly more of a hustle rather than your usual, top tier university, top tier internships kind of lifestyle.
And in Germany, if you are actually going to a top tier, what they'd call target university in the US, mm-hmm. Would it be easier to make that transition, or is it still considered pretty difficult?
I think it's definitely easier, but many of the people who would go to the target universities would actually end up staying in Germany because, mm-hmm. on the one hand side, they're deeply ingrained within their network in primarily it's Frankfurt. There's bits in Munich and there's bits in Berlin. And there's some smaller bits in other cities, but they're really, really, really regionally focused, almost exclusively on Germany, some of the other German-speaking countries. So I think there's more of a focus to stay in Germany rather than actually breaking out into London. You do see the occasional guy, that went through the undergrad and post-grad, which is a typical thing in Germany. Most people will have a master's degree going into banking. And you'll see them on occasion breaking into the London market.
And so instead of the typical 4 years of undergraduate, then going to banking in the US, in Germany or another Europe, I assume this is common throughout Europe, but you take the 4 years undergrad and then you do, is it a 1 year master's or a 2 year master's?
That will actually vary. So most commonly it'll be a 3 year undergrad, and then it'll be a 2 year master if you're at depending on your kind of degree. So if you're on a normal university and you do like an economics master's or a finance master, it'll be a 2 year program. Oftentimes it'll just be a 1 year program within business schools. They'll have a more condensed sort of curriculum, which allows you to take, rather trimesters and semesters, and they just really want you to push through as hard as you can and get into the job market.
So you're coming from a semi-target here. How did you actually pull it off? I mean, how did you make that initial jump? That initial leap was probably the hardest part. Am I accurate?
Exactly. So the biggest trick to pull out of your hat is to get that first internship. Mm-hmm. And that was for me, especially in Germany, that was extremely difficult. That required a lot of hustling, a lot of going out and talking to a lot of people, and it was, in my case, virtually just speaking to as many people as I could find, getting as much information as I could gather, and present yourself well once you do get that rare opportunity to actually interview with a firm. I was really lucky that I got to speak to a private equity fund, and they didn't seem to mind that I had absolutely no background in banking, finance, or anything related, and that I was just really keen on the sector, and that got me the start.
Why do you think that was? Was it just the enthusiasm you showed in the interviews? Was it how you networked or the people you knew there? Or how do you think that came across? Why do you think they're willing to take a risk on you? Did they not really care what their interns were doing, or did they actually use you for anything useful?
I think that there's two sides to it. Obviously, they want people who are able to do the work, and they want people who are really interested in the work they're actually going to be doing. So obviously, the type of work you get depends on your skill levels and on your willingness to take it on. I think what the firm that I started out with really liked about me is that I said, I don't know much about it yet, but guys, if you just point me to it, I'll figure it out. And that's sort of the ethos I made sure to keep going, because I think that's ultimately what's going to get you places, is the ability to say, I might know something, but unless I've actually done it and I've seen more experienced people do it and teach me, I won't really know what it's all about.
So how do you feel like you got good at communicating that? Was it just practice, interview practice? Was it something where you just naturally feel gifted in terms of interviewing and kind of expressing that passion, or is it something that you had to work on?
I think for the most part, and this will vary for every person's view. I think for the most part, it's really just my eagerness to break into the field, and I think I managed to get that across quite well. I didn't really prepare for interviews. I don't think at these early levels, that you want to have too much of prepared things. You need to understand the structure, but you need to make sure you stay yourself. And I think that's what really caught on with a lot of people, because oftentimes, especially when I interview people, I can sense that they're telling me something that is not accurate about themselves. They're telling me a story that doesn't fit to what I see and what I hear in their voices, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
I try
not
to
genuine.
make sure that
it's not genuine.
stay exactly genuine and authentic. And really, that catches on with people. They really enjoy that.
Man, I can't tell you how many people miss the boat on that. I agree wholeheartedly. It's something where everyone practices the technical interview questions and they master that, and then they master their fit story. They memorize their fit stories and they go in, they sound like robots, and then don't understand why they don't make it to the second round or final round. It's the students that have the genuine passion or at least can make it sound like they have the genuine passion and they know the technicals. Yeah. Those are the ones that really end up going far and getting to a lot of final rounds. And ideally offers. But anyway, so let's continue. So you were able to land this internship. It sounds like you're a fairly natural speaker. You were comfortable kind of really showing that passion genuinely. And so people kind of believed you. And so they took a risk on you coming from a quote non-target or whatever you want to call it in Germany.
Yeah,
so you're there at the internship, you learn maybe a little bit, you're doing some good work. You're still in Germany. Is that correct? At this point?
That is correct, yes.
So did you feel like, did you know all along, hey, I really want to get to London, or was this seen as a critical stepping stone, or was it kind of you were just trying to get whatever you could?
I think at that stage, I really was just trying to get anything I can get my hand on.
Got it.
And London sort of came later, because you once you start out and sort of the first time around, you just start working on a deal and you realize, wow, this is huge. To you as a person, obviously this deal never goes anywhere and you never hear about it anywhere in any kind of news, but to you it's huge. And as you go on, as you see more and more deals, you begin to realize, especially at that time, that was all pre-Brexit world, that was still when London was the center of everything. It probably still is, but it's fading a bit. And you realize the real action, that's in London, in Europe, in my view.
Got it. So once you realized that, did you kind of set a goal of, well, I guess maybe it's the first goal, I want to just break into investment banking, and the second goal being I'd love to be in London if possible. Was that kind of how it went? Like you would you still would have taken a job in Germany, obviously, in investment banking, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I had felt that that I could do some good work in Germany with a decent firm that has a decent track record within, in just getting deals done, I probably would have considered staying, but it's too irregular. It's too sensitive to sort of smaller movements within sentiment that, a region can be hot for a while and then a region turns cold and then your deals are just fading away and you just end up doing marketing like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, no live deals, all pitching, basically.
Exactly.
So,
and you really don't want that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about once this internship ends. It's a good experience, I assume, and
Yeah.
so this is the summer before you graduate from your master's. Is that correct?
This is so I took a gap year in between undergrad and postgrad, and it's quite a long gap year. It's about a year and a half. So so I left the undergrad university I was at and moved to a different city, moved to Frankfurt, where I then started working. And I started working in this first place, and I realized, this is actually really cool work. And this was a buy-side firm. But I also realized compared to some of the other people that are working there, I know astonishingly little, and I have very little sort of practical skills. And the key to me was you got to build this out, and you can only build this out through experience. So I went around a bit, and I did a sales and trading internship, and I've done an M&A advisory internship as well. And that sort of cleared up the picture for me, and I realized, none of these things, none of the advisory or sort of the trading floor environment is for me. I have a clear view where I want to go, and that's investing.
Got it. So you were set on private equity. You just knew your best path to get there was through banking, I assume.
Exactly. Effectively, there's no other way around it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little more common, at least in the US now. I don't know if this is true in Europe where they'll recruit out of undergrad, but it's still very few funds do that. I assume it's similar.
Yeah, it's very similar to that.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a few internships in Germany, one, sales and trading, M&A, private equity. You kind of get a feel for everything, which is really nice because you can kind of figure out what you want, and you say, hey, okay, so ideally I'm going to London, I'm going to banking, and then I'm getting into private equity. And you were successful in doing that. Can you just give me a little bit about that transition of the actual recruiting while in Germany for London for the full-time role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Frankfurt recruiting for full-time roles is almost not comparable to that of London, because for most of the banks, unless it's either a German bank, which there is only one of, or it's a bank that has a great German presence, there is next to no specific graduate intake beyond the summer interns.
Got it.
Whereas in London, you'll have also, again, it varies by bank and it varies by year, but you might have 2/3 of summer interns, and then you have an additional third that comes through, any outside route, be it through either networking or just through a graduate application. And as far as I'm concerned, most of the applications will go directly online through the banks and online recruitment tools and straight to the interview rounds.
Okay. So can you tell me about your experience specifically?
Yeah, my experience was rough, to be honest. I found it really tricky because, once you go out of the smaller pool in Germany and into the big pool in London, you'll realize that there are many candidates that are extremely well qualified, and many of them will be better qualified. There's always going to be someone that is, on paper, a better fit for the role. What I think sets people apart, especially in graduate recruitment, is this level of authenticity that they can convey to the interviewer. I'm here because I'm really interested in this line of work and I really want to learn, rather than saying, this sounds like it's a fun career, I might be wanting you to do this in the future. You have to have your mind set on it. I think that's the key thing. So when you get into the room, once you drop off your applications, once you've been to the career fairs and you've done all these things, and you actually manage to get an interview, which to many people will be an extremely rare occurrence. I can only speak for the school I went to. Out of the entire, I don't know how many dozens or hundreds of people that graduated, eventually there was 2 people that went directly to a banking role. I was one of them, and the other guy was actually also a good friend of mine, also German. And that is sort of the heartbreaking thing at times, because you'll rarely actually end up getting into that interview room. But once you're in, obviously to a great degree your technical abilities, but once again, the authenticity is what will set you apart.
So how many actual interviews did you land? Was it only one? Was it only that one?
I landed two. I totally bombed the first one. Like that was arguably the worst performance of any interviewee ever.
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about why you think that happened.
It was a phone interview. I remember that, and I was utterly unprepared. Quite frankly, I didn't really have a good story. I didn't really know much about the place I was actually interviewing with. The technical questions were fine. I mean, they can't really ask you too many,
So your authenticity, they didn't believe your authenticity on that phone interview because they felt.
I think they must have thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
Like I was pranking them or something. It's like, why do you want to work here? Well, you guys seem nice. This kind of thing where you just like, okay, that's a question I didn't expect. And that was just a terrible performance. Yeah.
That surprises me a little bit, speaking to you now that you weren't prepared for that, or had you not come across Wall Street Oasis or any interview stuff? Had you not done any mock interviews prior to that phone, or you thought, oh, this is just a phone round, it's not a big deal?
Exactly. That's what I thought. This is not a big deal. It's a fun interview. You can nail this.
So you kind of downplayed it. You were leaning a little bit too much on your likable kind of agreeableness and comfort speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
I made that.
Really early on.
I made that same exact mistake in undergrad. I kind of was doing a little too much winging it early on, where I realized, like, in my second set of interviews, interview 9, 10, 11 that I had were about 10 times better than my first few. I'm sure the same.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So okay, well, you only had a few interviews. So that first one, you were just thinking to yourself, what were your thoughts, I guess, after you kind of didn't make it past the phone screen?
I thought this was it. I thought this was the end. I really thought, what have I just done to myself? I could have easily stayed in Frankfurt, work going forward there.
So you had already moved to London with the expectation that you
exactly.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you took a big risk.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, full speed. I took probably the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life.
Where were you living?
It's a big financial commitment going to business school and moving abroad, leaving everything behind, going into an extremely expensive city.
So where were you living were you in debt at this point, trying to kind of just survive? Or
massively. Yeah. I've taken out every single loan that was available to me.
Oh my gosh. That's scary.
But yeah, I mean, it's certainly not risk-adjusted returns. I did not adjust for any kind of risk. I just went for the full degree of risk that I could find and tried. Yeah.
Great. I think what I had missed is you had already moved to London, and that kind of helped you with at least you were there. So I think
that helps immensely.
Yeah, you're there. Did you do a lot of I know networking is very different in London than it is in New York, but were you doing any sort of kind of coffee meetups? I know it's a little bit more taboo over there to be kind of aggressively networking, but did you do that?
I really tried, but it's difficult. It's really, really difficult because most people will not make that much of an effort to set aside time unless you're, like a stellar candidate.
Right.
And they can actually brag about bringing you in. If you're sort of, middle of the pack, didn't go to the best school, doesn't have the best internships, doesn't really stand out from the crowd, I'm not going to spend time on this guy.
Totally. Okay.
That's a really hard angle to get into.
So
unless you can have, some kind of connection to the person you're trying to get a meeting with, it's extremely hard in my experience.
Got it. So you had your internships, you were in business school in London, you're taking on a bunch of debt. Have you graduated at this point, or are you you have a couple months till graduation?
I still had a couple of months to go. And interviewing, especially in business school, interviewing practically begins within the first few weeks of you actually getting into your classes. So you normally start 1st of September or something, so early September you'll start. There'll be your careers fairs. Some of them are already in August. So
right, so you had already missed the boat. Like it was gone, everything had already sailed. So you were sticking around to finish your degree. What was the plan if you didn't land a job? Just to go back to Germany?
You know what? I never thought about it. I tried to stay halfway optimistic.
Hey, that's great. That's great.
Because I mean, there is opportunity. I mean, there's sort of a very, very long tail of very small shops where you can do, your typical European off-cycle internships for 6 months and you'll get by. You won't make the full salary. You won't be doing the cool things, but at least you'll be within some kind of role and you will get paid and you can somehow manage to survive.
Right.
That is
because we know rent is super cheap in London, right? So
it's good. Yeah, I think per square meter it's like $1 cheaper than New York. That's a big saving there.
So tell me about this second interview that you managed to land. Was it a surprise? Were you jumping up and down for joy, thinking I'm going to be ready this time? And how did you prepare?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a firm that I had met at a career fair about 4 or 5 months before, where I was informed, you know what, there's no need to apply anymore. We filled our ranks. We're done for the year. I was like, okay, great. This is really positive news from you guys. Happy to hear that for you. Doesn't help me much. Anyway, I just went ahead and dropped my application anyway. A couple of months later, I get this invite, choose a slot to come in. And it's a massive group of people interviewing. I'm like, okay, whatever the person had just told me was completely inaccurate because, there's like 30 people here interviewing for a big, big day here.
And that was for one position or that was for two positions? Did you know how many spots were open or it was just 30 people in one day kind of going through?
There was just, I would say about 30, maybe 25, 30 people in one day. They all looked like graduates. Graduates, I find you can immediately tell from appearance, shakiness, sweating, scared of their lives going into an interview room, and it was pretty good. It was a good experience. It was much more friendly than sort of this first interaction I had at the careers fair. It was actually a really much more relaxed environment. I felt this wasn't quite as pressured, and they were more looking for people that actually fit into the firm's culture.
Wait a second. And, so this is your second interview, probably your last interview you're going to get, and you're not stressed out going into these interviews. Your palms aren't sweating. You're not freaking out.
They are. I'm not showing it.
Right. So how do you not show it? I think a lot of people.
I have no idea. I just tell myself I didn't show it.
Right.
I probably did. I probably was working the worst out of everyone. But you try and stay cool. You just have to relax and you have to tell yourself, there's always another chance.
Between that first phone interview where you kind of clearly failed and the second live interview, how much time do you think you spent in terms of prep to get ready for this live interview?
Quite a lot. To be honest, quite a lot. And
can you be specific about what you did?
Yeah. So I've spoken to people who had interviews, obviously, people I know that had interviews with other firms, just so I can get a better sense of what I would actually be asked and sort of understand what it's like. I managed to leverage the careers resources at the business school, and you just have them do a mock interview with you. I mean, they don't know what it's like, but they can give you a good sort of overview what an interview environment would feel like and where you sort of get tested on some of the things you say and just get a better feel. And then obviously the key part is Wall Street Oasis offers a lot of depth in terms of allowing you to sort of go through different experiences over the years, and you will find it's fairly consistent. Interviews tend to be the same for these kind of levels, and it gives you a lot of info, and that allows you to anticipate what you're going to be asked. Obviously, you're going to try and prepare your answer, but eventually, you're going to have to stay authentic, and you're going to try and not wing it as much as you probably will end up doing. But
were there any questions
I find that to be key?
And so I think the mock interviews are really important to highlight here because
absolutely.
I mean, for me, when I did mock interviews, that was just huge. My improvement every time I did a mock interview, I felt like I improved by, initially 10%, then 5%, and it adds up. And, you almost feel like you're twice as good or better than a lot more people versus when you first start. Did you feel the same way? And how many mock interviews did you end up doing? Like 1, 2, 5?
I must have done just somewhere between 5 and 10 almost.
Yeah, that's great.
And as you say, this continuous improvement from it, and it comes from this immediate feedback that you get from a person that has absolutely no interest in being nice to you.
Yeah, it's huge.
And they will just tell you, this is what I've asked. This is how you responded. That's complete nonsense.
Right.
You just babbled on for 2 minutes about something I didn't even ask you. Make sure to stay on point. Or you've responded in this kind of way that sounded completely, it sounded completely wrong. It doesn't sound like who you are. It doesn't match to anything you've said before. Careful of how you speak. Remember that your words and your tone convey a message. It's not just your words. It's not just your tone. You need to put both of them together. These are the things that I find they really help you. It's a lot of pain to go through that because obviously, you go to a business school, you think you're it. You think you're one of the best people in the world. And then someone just tells you, you know what, that was terrible.
Yeah, I think it's really eye-opening and it's humbling, and it's also how you improve a lot. And it's also how you become a much more competitive candidate with everyone else out there. So anyways, I think it's critical. I think I hope any listeners out there that do have interviews coming up, you guys, whether it's pairing up with a friend, a mentor, anybody, just make sure you do mocks, not just study the technicals and, memorize your answers. So anyways,
yeah.
So you're in this interview, anything unexpected that was asked of you? And after all that prep, was there any curveballs that were thrown your way, or did you feel pretty comfortable throughout?
The level of comfort I had was extremely high. It was surprisingly high. There were no sort of curveballs, nothing mean, nothing, mouse-spirited. I mean, I had one guy that just insisted on speaking into my CD, so he would just hold a piece of paper in front of his mouth. I don't know if it was a thing of his own or if he was trying to throw me off. But yeah, that was the worst thing that happened. I think he was just trying out some new interview tactics.
Did you ever have any good cop, bad cop? Did you have like a two-on-one type of situation where there's one person being nice to you and one person was being a jerk?
I never had that, but I've heard about that happening.
I've had that.
I've never had it personally because I don't think I would deal with that particularly well.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation. It was not pleasant. Anyways, so, okay, great. So you had a high level of comfort. It's probably why you got the offer. It sounds like you were just smooth, smiling, genuine.
Yeah.
You really came across as your authentic self. Tell me about that feeling when you get the call, I assume, or the email. Tell me how that went down.
I was actually out that night. I was at a concert, and I just looked at my phone. I got a voicemail saying, "Hey, we need to speak." He sounded moderately sort of negative, and it's like, "Hey, I've got bad news for you, guy."
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been through this before, so I had no idea. I was thinking, "Oh man, he's going to call me and tell me I don't have a job."
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, sort of after a couple of hours, it kept me up all night. After a couple of hours, I realized, you know what? If I'm about one of 30 people that day, they probably have been interviewing the whole week. Yeah, they're never going to call anybody to tell them they don't have a job. And that was fairly uplifting for me in that moment. And yeah, the next morning I called the guy and he said, "Hey, we really liked you. We want you to come on board. Welcome to the team."
It's amazing.
And the feeling from that, the relief you get from that is amazing. It's a great feeling because you feel like, this is the biggest step that you had to take and you somehow managed to take it.
For sure. I think that's incredible. That must have been, I remember when I got the offer, the first offer, then it's euphoric.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I guess, great. So you kind of went through was it the traditional banking, 101 you hear about in the forums where you're just working the long hours, you start there, once you graduate? Did you have any time off before? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I had absolutely no time off. It actually overlapped with my degree.
Oh, brutal.
I ended up writing an absolutely exquisite master's thesis in 3 days. And yeah, that was the worst part about it. So I wrote it, and I could have moved a couple of days ago, and I stumbled over the copy of it and the comments on it. And one of the comments on it was, "This piece of work is disturbingly vague." And I was like, "Yeah, well, I wrote it in 3 days, buddy."
Amazing. So you got through it. You got your degree, though. That's what matters, right?
Exactly.
You passed, and
exactly.
then so
we don't talk about the GPA.
Fair enough. So you're through. you've already started to work. Tell me a little bit about the deal. Were you pitching a lot initially? How was business?
It was really odd because I was the only one that was speaking German on the team, and it was a big team of about 35 people, so a bit more than 35 at the time even. And for me, it was being plunged in as the only one that wasn't a summer intern before, into that sector-specific team, and I felt a bit sort of on the outside of everything. And what really helped me is to just, whenever you get a chance, speak to someone. If someone asks you, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? Definitely do that. No matter how busy you are, try and squeeze 5 minutes in with that person. Get to know them, and see that you can get yourself into the group a bit more, especially if you're in a situation where you feel like you're on the outside. Make sure that you're an interesting person and that you are a reasonably eager person to work with. The thing is, be the kind of person that everyone wants to work with, and make sure your work backs it up. So, there's 2 things. You need to be reasonably inquisitive and reasonably engaging with people, but don't overdo it. Don't constantly try and network. Make sure you get your work done as well.
And in terms of getting the work done, can you share the hours that you were working in that first year, approximately?
It varied a lot, but it was constantly above sort of 70 to 80 hours. You'd work a good normal day would start between somewhere around 8 to 9 a.m. and the big rush home, especially among sort of the analysts, would be between 12 and 2 a.m. Rarely would it be past 2 a.m. I mean, you do have sort of your once or twice a month, you'll stay all night and you just take the 6 a.m. cab home and you just jump in the shower and come back. But, that's not out of the ordinary.
Be honest, do you miss those days?
Not even one bit.
Neither do I. Anyway, so you're going through this banking scene. Tell me a little bit about kind of what your next step was, what the thinking was, and then kind of how you let's start talking a little bit about your transition into private equity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the place I was at wasn't performing well overall. Eventually, everyone got let go within my vertical. That was fun. I mean, especially 10 months on the desk, 12 months on the desk. You find out, you've just been happy for a year and now you're incredibly sad because you don't have a job anymore. And you're really, really struggling to find the meaning in what you've just spent a whole year of your life, literally 24/7 on. That's heartbreaking. You get really, really drunk and you move on. And that's it. You get that one day where you can just, be upset and forget everything.
Was there any warning coming before the whole team was let go, or was it just did it just get dropped on you and then 2 weeks later you're out? Or was it immediate?
There was a lot of rumors going on at the time already. There was big discussions going on. So they had a first round of redundancies, I think, back in December or so. Those were the performance-based ones that actually hit some of the analysts as well, some of the first-year analysts. And then they had another round. When was that? That was in April that year. So about 4 or 5 months later, they've had the second round, and that was the big round. It was just a massive cut across everything.
And how much warning did you have? How much warning? You already knew. So did you have time to prepare? Were you actually out looking? Was everyone out looking, kind of interviewing for other positions?
I think people were already looking. Obviously, I didn't think I was going to get the cut.
You're cheap labor. Yeah, you're cheap labor for a bank. Exactly. Yeah, that's surprising.
I was just hoping I could somehow get through it. I thought if I just keep on working, no one's going to notice that I'm still here. That was a stupid idea, by the way. Don't do that. So yeah, eventually everyone got let go that day. It was all done in one day. And you don't need to come back anymore or anything. You just, leave your BlackBerry behind. And yeah, those are the BlackBerry days too.
You're dating yourself.
You just deal with it.
Yeah. And so, what was your next step? And did you have any money saved up? Was debt still kind of hanging over your head at this point?
Oh yeah, the debt was massively hanging over. That was the biggest thing for me at the time. I was just going crazy. I thought, I just started repaying this on decent rates. I'm making progress here. And all of a sudden, well, there's no more progress to be made because I've got about 90 days left before I don't get paid anymore.
So there was a 3-month severance with this.
Exactly. It was what do you call it in the UK is gardening leave.
Got it. And
So
so
they just send you home.
did you feel confident that you could land something else, or was this a bad time for other banks as well?
To be honest, it wasn't so bad because the next day the phone started ringing already, and people heard about it. This was a big issue in the city. Everyone heard of it, and all the headhunters obviously were very keen to get you on the phone, get you into the interview room, and move you on as quickly as possible.
Right. So
after a few days,
you started getting
it
lined
kicked
up.
off.
You started getting lined up right away. Kind of.
Exactly. It was pretty quick, to be honest. I was quite lucky with that.
I don't know if you were lucky. I think the initial getting through that initial kind of being the only one selected out of 30 people in that live interview, that was probably skill and luck. And then actually once you're in, I think you have that brand. Once you got in, it's like everyone wants you. It's similar here in the US. It's once you're an experienced analyst, it's like you're a hot commodity for everything, for other banks or private equity. And so that doesn't surprise me. It's similar there. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the next stint in banking. How was that any different culturally? And then specifically how you started you had kind of had the initial goal of going to private equity. So when did you start kind of planning for that, and how did you do that?
Yeah. My mind was always on private equity, even through the first few months already. I was trying to work out what are some of the kind of firms that go for first, second year analysts, especially within my sector, and just try and get a bit of a head start on everyone else. Try and talk to people, and there were a handful of good headhunters that would give you really good advice on these things. And they said, most people will look for someone with deal experience much rather than brand. Especially within your sector, especially within the mid-market. They want deal guys. They want guys that can easily talk to, a 55-year-old CEO like it's their best friend. Did you convey a good message?
Did you get any deal experience at that first stint, or was it mostly pitching?
It was mostly pitching, to be honest. Okay. There was some deal experience involved, but the thing that I realized where I would struggle going forward is, you're in a massive team. Your deal teams are 6, 7, 8 people for no reasons. You'll end up as an analyst, just moving your work up to the associate. That moves it on to the VP. He moves it on to the MD. The MD shoves it back down, and it just lands with you again after, 4 or 5 turns in the middle. It makes no sense. You could have just done that directly. And I realized, if you want proper experience, go for a smaller firm. Go for a team where you can talk to the MD. Where he's actually a person that you're aware of. Just to give you an example on this, during my sort of my exit interview, if you will, the global head of the team spoke to me, and he said to me first thing, I know we haven't spoken before. I was at the firm for 10 months, 12 months almost, and I'd never even seen the guy.
Yeah.
That's a big difference, and that was important for me in my next move is to make sure, when you work with someone that has something to say. Don't work with someone that's 2 years older than you.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. And then specifically, how did you set yourself up for that? Was it mostly just looking, keeping your eyes open for more of these kind of smaller boutique banks?
Absolutely. And talk to people that Talk to people that have done, talk to your VPs that you work with. Look where they're going and ask them, why are you going there? Or, I'm looking for this kind of firm. Who do you know? Do you know this MD? Is this a good guy? Does he do a lot of deals? Does she do a lot of deals? And I think that's extremely helpful because you'll find there are places out there that have very little or almost no reputation on the outside. But once you're within a specific sector, within a specific even subsector, you'll find that a lot of the mid-market guys especially have absolutely stellar reputations, and they'll get really good deals, and they'll have a very, very high frequency of deals as well.
Yeah, and sometimes the revenue per banker there is much higher than at the larger bulge brackets, the larger firms.
Sometimes it's not even comparable. Some of these guys will absolutely bring in money like no one else in the city can.
Right, it's interesting. So you're at this smaller firm, and you're doing well. Hopefully, more live deals. And then how long do you wait before you do you start talking to headhunters immediately once you're at this second bank? Do you wait 6 months, or what's the cycle like for private equity recruiting? I know in the US it has shifted incredibly early. People are getting recruited 18 months or earlier than 18 months. So basically they're on the desk within 6 months, they're getting recruited for private equity. How about what's it like over there?
For me, it wasn't quite like that. It wasn't that early. There is, I can see a sense of people trying to get people in earlier. I can see firms trying to move it forward, but I don't think it's quite as early as sort of within your first year. They really want you to at least get 2 good years of work. And so they'll come to you at about 12 months in, 18 months in. And also the sort of the lead time to you leaving your old firm and joining a buy-side firm is not that long. So for me, it was just a 1 month break, if you will,
so
where I received my buy-side offer, handed in my notice, and left my old firm and started at the new job.
Got it. And so can you tell me a little bit more about that process? Was it through a recruiter? Was it through networking? How did that work?
For private equity, I think it's effectively, for the most part, it's through recruiters. And there's a vast sort of difference between recruiters. You'll have your handful of really good guys that understand what you're trying to do, guys that know what the hiring firm is looking for. And then there's guys that will virtually peddle anything they can find at you, and it'll mostly be things that aren't even related to who you are. They won't bother reading your profile or anything. They'll just throw everything at you and see what sticks. So make sure you don't waste time on those guys. Be very specific, be very articulate. I mean, you have made it that far. Show that you belong, show that you know what you're looking for, and speak to the right people.
Were the initial meetings with the recruiters, did you feel they were almost like interviews themselves? Were they intense? Were they kind of almost like more casual, but you knew how important they were? Or how did that work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because the good recruiters, they will always want to meet you first. They will want to meet you in person. They will not just do this through email. They will want to see you, and they want to see how you talk to them about this specific role. They want you to, they want you to be the kind of person that goes in, knows the firm, knows exactly what they do, and is very, very comfortable in explaining their motivation. They will test you hard on the motivation. They obviously won't test you on your technical skills. Waste of time for both parties involved. But they want to see a guy or a person that can really clearly outline, why are you here today?
And when you answer that question, do you have to be very specific, or were you very specific about only private equity, or were you able to say, I'm open to hedge funds as well? Or did you? Go ahead.
For me, it was always private equity. I have had very little interest in hedge funds.
What's your thought on that? What's your thought on that? If someone was interested in either or, do you feel like it might hurt them if they kind of said both? Do you feel like there was actually a benefit to being so focused?
I think it's advantageous to be focused because fundamentally, in my view, the two types of investing are completely different. And
absolutely, yep.
I think the main difference is a hedge fund at times will be an antagonistic investor, which means they will not necessarily agree with what's going on at the firm, and they will be happy to disagree on that. A private equity firm will always seek a partnership with management or with their co-owners or with the founders or whoever they're working with, because the ultimate goal is to drive the firm forward, whereas the hedge fund sees an opportunity to increase value in a much shorter time frame. I think that's a key difference, and that's the difference in mentality. And if you find yourself ambivalent between the two, that might be the case for you. But in most cases, if you say that to someone else, especially someone interviewing you, they will question your actual motivation, because they will question whether you're just looking for a big check rather than actually doing the work.
Yeah, whether you actually understand what. Yeah, exactly. Whether you actually understand what each of the roles actually entails, because they're so different. They're both investing roles, but they're just, like you said, it's a very different process. So in terms of the actual recruiting process, so you were speaking to recruiters, you made a good impression, started getting some interviews. Can you tell me about how many interviews you got and what the experience was like at these different funds? Were there modeling tests? Were there cases? What was thrown at you?
What surprised me the most is how eager most firms were to get me into the interview room very quickly. Especially from my experience for graduate recruiting, I thought, I'm never going to get an interview at any good buy-side shop. I've just been let go by one firm. I've gone to a much smaller firm. No one's going to care. That was completely wrong. Firms are really, really keen to get you in normally if you've got a good profile and you seem like and if the headhunter can obviously talk through your profile, this is a really good guy, this is a really good person to get this job, you should listen to them, you should speak to them, find out if there's a fit.
So you feel like you were able to make that impression for the headhunters to actually push you hard, or do you feel like your deal experience from, say, the second firm, the live deal experience, was enough on the resume, or a combination of both?
I think it was a combination of both.
Okay.
So they'll obviously exclude you from any kind of interviews if you have absolutely no deal experience or very little. Right. And then vice versa, they'll exclude you, or the headhunter won't even shortlist you if the headhunter doesn't feel like you're a good fit at the firm. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really important to understand. These guys determine how you are presented to your potential new employer. And it's your job to make that first impression before you even meet the firm. And that's to the headhunter, in my view.
Absolutely. So the specific process, they're clearly pushing you, so you're getting interviews. How many interviews did you do? Did you get one offer? Did you stop after the first one? Give me a little bit of background in terms of the numbers and what was thrown at you. Yeah,
absolutely. So I've more than 10 different firms. Absolutely. So there was a lot of traction. In a combination of both. It was either generalist funds or sector-specific funds even. And it wasn't even my investment banking sector. There was other sectors as well that would just look for someone with a decent background, mm-hmm. that can do the work, that can do the job, and that's really keen and motivated and, high energy kind of person that they want to work with. The processes would generally be fairly similar, I'd say. So normally you'll meet someone around the mid-level kind of employee, sort of your VPs up to principals. Mm-hmm. And in the first conversation, it'll be them explaining to you what they do. And that's a great opportunity for you to, one, learn a lot and to make yourself interesting by asking good questions, by being inquisitive about how they do things, why they do so, and spending your time wisely, because you have an hour. And that's all you get. And that's 1 hour to make a good impression before you actually move on to important stages. There'll generally be very little technical stuff in my experience, mm-hmm. Because they'll put you into either a case study or a modeling test, and that'll answer most of their questions in terms of your technical abilities.
And when is that given? If you make it to the second round or third round?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Normally second or third round, you'll end up doing, just a computer-based test, or you get like a take-home case study.
Got it, like a 24-hour, like you gotta get it back within 24 hours type of thing, or?
It could be 5 hours, it could be 24 hours, it could be 2 days.
So tell me,
there's some degree of variance.
So around 10 firms, did you get more than one offer? Did you get one offer? How did that pan out?
I eventually stopped after that one offer with my, at the time, number one firm. That was the one firm I wanted to work for. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to go through all the endless rounds. I mean, there's a lot of rounds to go through in private equity.
How many rounds would you say were for the one you ended up taking? How many rounds was that one specifically?
It was 7 or 8 rounds. And
Are you serious? 7 or 8?
Nearly 15, 17, 18 people. The view is you have to meet everyone. Everyone has to give a thumbs up on you.
And so that process had to be a good, at least 2 months, 3 months. Am I right? Or did they condense it?
Yeah, it was about 6 weeks to 8 weeks. It wasn't too bad.
That's still pretty fast though for that many rounds. I'm impressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they were
stay flexible.
Yeah. How many people were kind of up against you, do you think, in that process? And how many associates were they hiring?
So they would hire 2 a year, 1 in winter, 1 in summer.
So it was one spot basically.
And the headhunter filters out a lot, because I eventually obviously ended up interviewing all the associates that would come in.
Yeah.
It would be probably 5, 6, 7 guys they would interview for this one role at a time.
Got it. Okay. So getting into the interview room seems like that's your chances are it's tough. It's tough because the people who are in there are probably really good too. So your odds are still against you, but it sounds like it's not as if there's 20 or 30 other people in that kind of final round. So that's good.
Exactly. You are part of a very, very select group already.
Got it. Okay. And then tell me why you think you got the offer.
I think it was, at the risk of me repeating myself, but most buy-side firms will want to see a natural investor, a person who's really, really interested in investing and that understands what it entails. It's a person that is clearly able to move on from advisory to making, decisions as a person who is responsible, as a person who understands risks that they have to take and they understand who and what they're working for. Because you are still, the fiduciary of someone else's money. It's not your own money that you're investing in. You're not sitting at your own computer at home. You still have a great responsibility, and that requires a lot of maturity, a lot of authenticity. If you're gonna, just try and get by, it's not gonna work, and you're gonna stand out like a sore thumb. It's obvious to everyone that's interviewing you.
Got it. And so you had kind of been gunning for this position for many years at this point. So you were you were ready when you got into that room. It sounds like. So tell me, is there anything, before we end, I would love to do another call with you at some point to dive a little bit more into the day-to-day aspects of PE and stuff. I really like, I really like this chat, but could you share just some words of wisdom? I know this podcast is more focused around the recruiting of banking and the transition and the struggles that you went through, but anything you want to leave the listeners with in terms of one piece of advice you may have given your younger self?
Yeah. The one thing that I've worked out later on, and a lot of people have told me, and I've realized when I was interviewing people, is if you're in the room already, if they invited you to an interview, they can see you working there. They've already made up their mind that you are a very, very strong candidate, and the job is yours to lose.
Great.
That is absolutely key. Once you understand that you're in the room already, you can have this job. I find that to be very comforting and very sort of soothing, and it slows you down a bit in terms of not being quite as nervous anymore. You don't have anything to prove. You've proven it already. Now back it up.
Yes.
Be authentic and be specific about what you want and how you get that across.
Yeah, I think that mindset is key. Absolutely key. I think I agree with you. It just allows you to kind of go in with that comfort, be a normal human being, and come across that way. I think a lot of people, especially coming out of undergrad, it's hard. It's a hard ask to do that. I think it might be a little bit easier because you were a little bit more mature. You had a little bit, an extra year. But yeah, I think if you pull that off, it's absolutely 100%. Anyways, I really appreciate you taking the time. This went on longer than usual, but because I found it so interesting. But thanks again, and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Awesome, man. Talk soon.
Cheers.
And thanks to you, my listeners. If you have any feedback at all, please send it through patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. And remember, you can book time with this specific guest or any one of our 270 mentors by going to services, find your mentor. Take care.